every actor and everybody's like, I like documentaries. Let's open up a documentary department.
This is Good One. I am Jesse David Fox, senior writer at Vulture and author of Comedy Book. My guest this week is Morgan Neville, easily the most accomplished, prolific pop culture documentarian alive. He's best known for such films as 2018's Oscar-nominated Won't You Be My Neighbor and 2014's 20 Feet from Stardom, for which he won both an Oscar and a Grammy. We talk about Lorne, his new documentary about Lorne Michaels, Man on the Run, his new documentary about Paul McCartney, as well as two of my favorite of his documentaries, Steve, his Steve Martin doc, and Roadrunner, his documentary about Anthony Bourdain. The thing about Morgan's career is I am super jealous of it. So here is Morgan Neville. I'm here with Morgan Neville. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So the first question we ask is, what is the funniest, strangest, or most fascinating thing that happened to you this week?
I have a movie coming out this week, so everything is a little surreal. But I had like a peak life experience last week.
Sure.
So maybe I should talk about that.
That's probably better.
This is my one chance to tell this story. I recently did a documentary with a guy named Paul McCartney.
I've heard of him.
And he played these shows in LA last week, these kind of two smallish concerts. And I got a ticket and I went, and he played a Wings song, Jet. And at the end of it, he said, has anybody seen Man on the Run, which is my documentary? And I said, yeah, that's cool. He said, it was directed by Morgan Neville. And I was like, that's cool. And he's like, I think he's here. And he goes, can you turn up the lights? And they turn off the spotlight on Paul. And he's like, Morgan, where are you? And I stand up and I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. He's like, you're going to have to sing the next one. And then he went back into playing. And I just thought, it's the greatest call out.
I was like, I literally thought he was going to bring you on stage. And I was starting to get
I'll do it. I'll play guitar.
Yeah.
So that was a peak life experience I just had.
That's beautiful. So you've had to start a lot of interviews in your career.
Yes.
What question do you like to start a sit down with?
I don't have a set question. It's interesting. When I prepare for interviews, I usually do a lot of preparation. Then I distill it all to a list of words. And then I never look at it when I do the interview. And I generally just try and think about the first question. A question I've used a lot starting an interview is, if I'm making a film about your life, what type of a movie is it? Give me a genre. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? Action film? And I think trying to see how people see their own lives.
That's good.
Is a way to start.
Gonna steal that question. Can you think of an interview that started off, not even with the first, but some point early on started off on the wrong foot and you had to recover?
Oh my God. I mean, I did a documentary called Best of Enemies about these debates between Gore Vidal and William Buckley. My first job out of college was working as a fact checker for Gore Vidal.
Amazing. At
The Nation magazine. A incredibly thankless job, not only because of the pay, but because my job was to tell him he was slightly wrong, which Gore Vidal, if you know anything about Gore Vidal, he did not like to be told he was slightly wrong. So years later, I want to make this documentary. So Buckley has died, but Gore was alive, living in the Hollywood Hills, as he said, in his Cedar-Sinai years of his life. And I went to this Spanish mansion up in the Hollywood Hills, and we go, and he has this kind of manservant who's like a hot Eric von Stroheim from Sunset Boulevard.
Got it.
So we go in the living room, we set up, and then Gore's in a wheelchair, and this guy picks Gore up and like takes him down the stairs into the living room, and we're still setting up, and Gore won't make eye contact and won't speak to us. He's just down, just frosty. And so we're setting up and we're going and we're getting ready. And my producer, by way of making conversation, says, you know, I understand that you served in the Aleutian Islands during World War II, and my father did too. And he said, you know, he could never get warm. It was so cold up there. And Gore, for the first words he says, he looks up and looks straight into the camera and said, I had my rage to keep me warm. And the rest of the interview pretty much went like that.
You got it.
You know, we had this 2.5 hour interview that it was horrible.
Yeah.
because we were asking him about William Buckley, and the idea that he and William Buckley would be in the same sentence offended him.
Yet he agreed to do the doc.
Yet he agreed. I mean, Gore Vidal famously said the only two things you never turn down in life are sex and television, so. But I will say, after we finished the interview, we're all shell-shocked. He carries Gore up in the wheelchair. And as we're about to leave, the servant comes and says, Mr. Vidal would like to know if you'd like to have cocktails. And we said, yes, we need a drink. And it's surreal enough. Let's go. So we were ushered upstairs into his bedroom, and he's in bed. And he says, sit down. And there are no chairs. So we sit on the edge of his bed, and the servant wheels in a drink cart and serves us cocktails. And then for the next 90 minutes, we have the most charming conversation. He is a different person.
Yeah,
he is just amazing and charming. And it was like, and then I think he finally kind of understood what we were trying to do with the film.
So you should have started with cocktails.
Yes, we should have started with the cocktails. Needless to say, I didn't use any of that interview in the documentary.
We got the story out of it, so it's worth it. So in terms of releases since 2023, I'm going to have to read this. You have directed This Is Not a House, Bono and the Edge, a Sort of Homecoming with David Letterman, The Saint of Second Chances, Steve, Martin, a documentary in 2 pieces, Piece by Piece, which was the Pharrell doc, Breakdown 1975, which is a film about the film revolution in the mid-1970s, Man on the Run, and Lorne. You were also the producer on The 12th Victim, Art of Everybody, Thank You Very Much, which is the doc about Andy Kaufman, What's Next, The Future, which is a TV series you did with Bill Gates, Leap of Faith, 4 SNL 50 documentaries, BTS Army, Forever Young, and Everyman, The Lives and Times of Peter Asher. Am I missing any?
Jesus Christ. When you put it that way.
How does someone do that?
Well, I didn't make all those in 3 years. I probably made all those over 6 years.
Sure. But even 6 years.
Yeah, it's crazy
because it's not if you looked at a different 3-year period, it's not going to be radically different than that.
It goes in waves.
Yeah,
and I'm actually not making a film right now for the first time in 8 years, just because of what you just listed. I'm taking a breath to find something I'm in love with doing because I did so many things. I mean, the reason I made so many of those things was, of course, I want to make a Steve Martin documentary or an SNL project. I've been an SNL fan forever. Or McCartney. I've been a Beatles fanatic my entire life. And that was always kind of the mountaintop for me of like, when am I going to ever do anything about a Beatle? And I always loved Paul. I will say, I put so much love and care into all these things.
This is not saying that any of these are bad movies. It's literally like, how does a person, like, on the most basic level of, like, when you're in the thick of whatever, the most thick period of doing this, what is your week like?
The other thing that helps is a lot of these are more archival documentaries. So I've made documentaries where you're traveling the globe. That is hard. Just hard on your family, hard on everything. Archive films, I don't have to travel as much. And part of how I work in my office is I have a bunch of edit bays. And I go and visit every editor multiple times a day and spend time with them. And it's almost like short order cooking. It's like, okay, you keep that warm there and here's some ideas and I react to that. And then I'll be back at the end of the day and we'll come back. And so I feel like it can be very productive that way. But also I feel like the meat of every one of those projects happened not at the exact same moment, So part of it is, and some films are like writing a novel and some are like making a sketch. So certain things are just like, let's not overthink it. It's kind of the nature of what they are. Like the YouTube project I did with Letterman. Like we did that whole thing in 3 months, which is crazy. But sometimes after you spend 2.5, 3 years working on a film, you're like, I just want to do something and not overthink it. Just pure instinct.
Film, edit,
do it,
release.
Film, edit, and it's coming out in a couple months and bam.
Yeah.
And I also have a lot of great people who
Yeah.
I've worked with for years and years and years. So my editors, who I write with essentially, and producers and everybody else. So it takes a village, but I am very hands-on on everything.
I mean,
will say.
again, that's what I was,
Yeah.
that's what I was curious about. How much of it is a reflection of the state of documentary, and like, because I feel like, let's say, it's hard to remember years.
Yeah.
10 years ago, the
Yeah.
streamers like, we need 1 million documentaries just to
Yes.
fill it out.
Yeah.
And I imagine that time you had a lot of projects. What is it? So talk about how you've rid such a wave. Ridden a wave.
I've been making documentaries for 33 years, so a long time.
Yeah.
And the first 15 years, nobody cared. Not just about my films.
Yeah, yeah.
They didn't care about documentary. And so I've seen many changes, from the home video. You could sell home video rights and stitch together whatever to get something made, and that went away. And then seeing the kind of rise and fall of kind of what streaming has done to documentary. I think changes started, really when Netflix started streaming 2012, 13, whenever it was, 14. And then there was kind of 2018, I would say, was kind of the documentary high water mark.
Yeah.
And not just that was the year One Should Be My Neighbor came out, but that was also the year of Free Solo, Three Identical Strangers, RBG. A bunch of documentaries that made $20 million.
Yeah.
Which is unheard of.
Yeah.
Before or since.
Yeah.
So, but after all of that, then it just became a bit of a mania where every actor and everybody's like, I like documentaries. Let's open up a documentary department and we're going to hire a documentary development exec. And it was like, what are you all doing? Like, just everybody suddenly had a documentary department. Yeah,
it was like, it felt like right before, when I don't remember when Making the Murder was, because Making the Murder did feel like then.
That was probably 15, 16.
It's like, so then there was that, and just felt like every media company was like, there just is a desire for this type of thing we can kind of do easily. And it became a different thing. Documentaries started feeling less like a film entity and more like, not necessarily like TV shows, but like this weird middle content space.
Well, it's part of what's happening, I think, with a lot of content, which is like, is everything becoming TV?
Yeah.
And not everything is, but a lot is, and I think, the viewing habits, I have talked to execs, normally if I'm working on a film, I would do a screening and have people watch it and get notes and write it up. And I had one exec say, oh, well, that's not how people watch. In other words, if you put people in a room and have their undivided attention, your bar is different from what our viewer bar is. I don't want to hear that. I literally,
it's truly like, I would not be surprised if certain large streaming services are like, we need to have screenings where people are allowed to have their phones out.
Yeah. Essentially, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
I feel like those aren't the films I make,
But then, someone's going to come around who goes, I'm going to make movies for people who have phones. And then they figure out how to master. There are a lot of
people doing that.
They really figure out the formula of how loud to mix dialogue at different times.
This is what AI is coming for, in all ways, which is, it's not, to me, and we're going down a dark wormhole here, but the problem with AI is that I think it's a problem of taste. If you don't care if something's great, if you just want something to just be there, AI can probably do that.
That is exactly what I feel like. People harp on generative AI, and you were famously part of the harping, one of the earliest cases of the harping, when you used AI to help you Anthony Bourdain read things that he's written. But what is really the thing that no one pays attention to is how AI has slowly shifted the bar of like what people expect out of content. Yeah. So it's made our expectations lower, so it's then easier for AI to meet said expectation.
Well, and essentially what an algorithm is, what these companies have been doing from the beginning, that is AI. people think of AI as one thing. There's been AI and in mix rooms, for 25 years, like it's a bunch of different things. But what the algorithm does and what it essentially is telling everybody is kind of what your minute by minute real viewing habits are.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is that if everything then gets reduced to a lowest common denominator, like, okay, what just captures the largest eyeballs per minute, per dollar, per whatever, that has nothing to do with quality, or passion.
Yeah, it's only attention, and good was sometimes people think maybe if things are good, people pay attention, and that does not seem like the current model.
No, there's an aspect of like, are we all just going to end up with like America's Funniest Home Videos again or whatever? It's like that's all. Everything is just.
I think there's lots of people's TikToks or Instagram feeds that are essentially just nonstop America's Funniest Home Videos.
I mean, it's all the same thing. Again, I see a lot of documentaries that essentially I say, okay, would this have been a 2020 segment 30 years ago? Or maybe if you're quality, it's a 60-minute segment 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But they're the same tropes that have been around forever. They're just kind of packaged and maybe shot better, but they're the same. I mean, that's so much of what true crime is, I mean, those tropes have been around forever.
Yeah. However you want to answer this question, how much money do you make? Or have, whatever way you prefer. But this is the goal. I've been starting to ask this because I do think especially after the strikes, there's a tendency to be like, well, they're all zillionaires and they don't need to work because they made one movie and they got $20 million for it. No. And I want to create a culture of just sort of like, these are people who have jobs that are this.
I've been a scrappy independent filmmaker for 33 years. I've never done an overhead deal. I've never taken investors, which is unusual, I would say, but I just value my independence as a filmmaker. And some years I have had years where I've like made pretty much nothing. And then other years where, because it's not a normal job, so maybe something comes in. I would say the idea of getting back end on movies is so rare, 20 Feet from Stardom. I never saw a penny of back end. It won an Oscar. Never saw a penny of back end. And, the company I made it for was sold to another company. And it's just, and then other people say, well, come sue us if you want your money. And you're like, okay, so I've had all those experiences. I've done way better than I ever thought I would do as a documentary filmmaker. But I also have turned down a lot of jobs that would have made me a lot of money because I did not get into this to make money, because for 20 years I didn't make money doing this. So it's a great reminder to say, I do this because I love this job. But I did not get into this to make money. That was not the intention, and increasingly I think about that now, as I get older. It's like time is the important thing. So it's like I just want to work on stuff that I love. But I will also say, for somebody who's on the higher end of established veteran documentary filmmakers, I think we make way less than other people at the top of their professions make. In a way, they're like, oh, so really this is how much somebody who's the kind of top of this profession in a way, that's all they make? So I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying, we're not getting rich.
You're not making what Christopher Nolan is making.
Not even not even the caterer.
The most extreme example. You mentioned turning things down, and I imagine, as you said, the way you say yes to projects is probably pretty obvious. Paul McCartney was like, "Can you do this?" Right? Can you think of an example of when you're turning things down? What is it? What is the thing that, if there's other people that are of a Paul McCartney ilk that might want to do or whatever? What drives you to say no to a thing beyond,
I mean, there are two types of ways projects happen. One is I think of something and I try and get it made. And the other is just stuff coming across the transom. And a lot of times they're not great, and they often will have money attached. Like, we just want to make it. And, the best films, and most of the films I've made, are things that kind of instantaneously I just say, I want to do that. And I know that's true. occasionally there are films where I'm kind of struggling with the decision. My wife is very good at saying, if you're thinking about it, do not do it.
Yeah.
Do not do it. You know, and increasingly I agree with her. Again, like I didn't get into this business to have an empire. And, you know, and I know I've kind of always kept my company lean, like a boutique.
Yeah.
And that's how I think of it, you know, and it's like, I just want to make sure everything we make is great and kind of everything else will take care of itself, you know? And I think because of that, a lot of people have approached me. I mean, the Steve Martin or Paul McCartney or Lorne were projects that came to me came to me alone, you know, and that's amazing, you know.
I can't imagine, for the type of docs you do, I can't imagine a better scenario than those people being like, tell the story. Well, it's an interesting, those, you bring up those, obviously, the most recent ones, but I believe the Pharrell doc was the first one that the artist was an executive producer on, and then I think Paul is an executive producer on that. How does that change the process or consideration for you?
I mean, the Pharrell project, it was such a massive collaboration. You know, he was writing songs for it. You know, it's like the rules that film we were making up. Like nobody had ever made a film like that before. And it's a documentary, but it's also a biopic, and it's a musical, and it's an animated feature, and it just was. It took years and years of work from all of us. He was part of the team of making it, but also like very hands off. You know, editorially. You know, I mean, I finished a whole cut in storyboard that I then showed it to him because I need him to write songs for me. You know, but he totally got it. I mean, I'm trying to think of any real substantive issues we had with it, and we didn't really. I mean, the McCartney project, I will blame all the other directors who came before me. Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard, Peter Jackson, they all gave EP credits.
These are easy people to blame.
So I will say there was a precedent that had been set that I stepped into, and I said, you know, this is not a good look. And there's like, but this is the precedent. So I blame them. But that said, I did not change a frame of that film for Paul. Not a single frame.
I asked because, like, it is as I'm sure you've noticed, it has become the way these things are happening, where a artist of a certain age or a professional basketball player of a certain age was like, I want to make a documentary of this, and my production company is producing it, or some version of it. Could this be an issue? Do you feel like this is an issue? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I'm not just saying this to be self-serving, but I feel like if people come to me, it's because of who I am as a filmmaker, and that gives me a certain amount of leverage to say, let me do my job, you know, and for the most part, I've been very lucky with that. Like but I also can smell projects that I've come and have meetings on, and I just see they want to do it's like a brand exercise for them. And it was like, run away, like some big, interesting people. And and then I've seen the films that have come out of those, and I'm so glad I didn't work on them. You know, it's like with music, for instance, you need each other. It's like one of the things about music films is you need their art to make your film. So you are in business together somehow. You have to be, which is different than making a film about somebody who you don't need underlying rights.
I guess I didn't think about that. Do they? You don't have to pay for music in a documentary about a person because assuming the person wants their music in, or do you have to?
You always pay.
You still pay.
Always pay. You might pay less if you're working with them, but you know, licensing Beatles songs for the McCartney documentary, we paid. We got a good rate. You know, but you always pay. And because they have other partners and publishing companies, you know, so even if you're paying a more nominal fee, but with music, I mean, it's part of what actually made a film like 20 Feet from Stardom so difficult was I mean, it was kind of the most difficult part of that film was that the music was everywhere. They didn't write any of it. They weren't the artists on any of it. Nobody owed it to them to give us those songs.
Yeah, they don't have publishing or the recording rights.
No, we had nothing.
Yeah.
And our big tool with that was just guilt of like, here are the people that made you money and records forever. Now pay it back.
Yeah.
And
If only
so,
you could have told them the movie was going to win an Oscar, I bet it'd be a
no,
lot easier.
nobody believed. I mean, we actually came up with a really unique way of charging kind of a tiered system based on how well the film did. If nobody saw the film, it wasn't going to be that much. But the film did well enough that everybody actually got, the publishers got back end on those songs. But still not that much. I remember, hearing different people complain to me of like, had I known this would have been such a hit,
Yeah, it's a relative. It's still a relative.
It's still a relative hit. That film made $5 million, which is,
I know, it's so crazy. I have very specific Paul questions. Because I have not spent time with him. But one of the things that I've noticed about Paul is his relationship to the album Ram.
Yeah.
It's so, like, I love the album Ram. It's one of my favorite things a Beatle has done, including the Beatles records. But he seems to be unable to process that people like it because what is it because of how the experience, how it was received? Like, I'm sure you talked about it. What is his relationship to Ram? Could you figure out a way to make him understand what this album is to people who are not him?
It's a work in progress. I mean, that's the interesting thing is like Paul's still processing this stuff. The first time I sat down to talk about the film, he started telling me the names of music critics who wrote bad reviews in 1971 and 72. And he said he would picture them in their little, attic desks writing these mean screeds, and I'm not going to name names, but I remember names he was giving me, like it stung. And going back and reading all the reviews of Ram, it's kind of brutal.
Yeah.
For a whole bunch of reasons we talk about in the film and otherwise, which is it was so out of sync with its time. Rolling Stone, we quote that one review written by John Landau, now Bruce Springsteen's manager and partner. But now that album is top 500 Rolling Stone album of all time.
Yeah.
So I think, he lost the battle, won the war. But I think he's still not sure of that.
Is he just, when you are a Beatle and you essentially reach the pinnacle of all type of success one can have, the most popular thing that ever existed and also changed, like invent a genre, like that's your standard of what success is.
Yeah.
Is it why he can't understand cult success? Like it doesn't even register as a thing that can happen?
At the time, it wasn't cult success.
Yeah.
So and I will say, Ram sold a lot of records, too. It's not like nobody bought it. And, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, and Another Day, I think were the two singles off Ram. I think Uncle Albert went to number one, So it's not commercial success. It had commercial success. It just was reviled by critics, which is a different thing.
Yeah, I guess that's fascinating.
And kind of a deeper, more personal. I mean, a lot of it was personal. And again, magazines like Rolling Stone were, it was like a cottage industry to pit John against Paul and pick camps. And so much of that was driven by the music press too.
Yeah, it's so interesting, him and John. Because, like, for the most part in the doc, you track it, and it seems like before John died, they, like, have a certain sort of piece together. But, like, recently, Vanity Fair published an interview they did in the past, and where Paul's just, like, complaining about John. And specifically, he tells the story of yelling at Jan Wenner about how John was going to be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before him as a solo artist. And in it, being like, somewhere along the way, because John's a martyr, I'm the Beatle number 2 and John's number 1.
Yeah.
In conversations, does it feel like it's still a thing that he wrestles with?
That part of it, I don't think so. But I think, this would be the sequel to Man on the Run. But, in the wake of John's death, I think for at least a decade, John became the ultimate martyr and sanctification of John Lennon, and And John was many, many things, a genius, a poet, an artist, not a saint, not a saint,
No.
I think nobody who knew John would say that. So I think there was just the kind of flattening of John.
Yeah.
Just becomes this untouchable deity. And it was incredibly frustrating for Paul, of course. And I think he grappled with that. I think over time, that's all kind of washed out, but that took a long time to process.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was going to ask about it later, but I will ask about Anthony Bourdain now because it is a similar thing. Like, obviously, I was a fan of his show, but since his death, he's become mythic.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense, as a person who made a movie about it, what is about him that has become larger than... It's not like it was a huge show.
Yeah.
It was on like a deep cable network show, and then obviously they're streaming it, but he's become outsized in a way that I think... I don't know if anyone... Like, I was not expecting him to be sort of a symbol of something.
It's amazing how much he means to people, and so many people... when I was making the film, but after the film came out and people still who talk about Bourdain, it's because he was such a unique figure in that way, like what the place he occupied in our culture of, having one foot in like downtown New York, post-punk poet, chefs, kind of the outsider punk rock guy. But also just an amazing observer. I mean, the other thing, when people asked Tony what he did, he said, "I'm a writer." And he was. I mean, what his show is in a way, a format for his writing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch an episode of his, as I did, and take out the voiceover, it's just a kind of glum-looking guy walking around a lot of beautiful places, The writing is the thing that elevates it. But I think it's somebody who just seems to kind of not be selling you anything, not be buying anybody's bullshit. Just kind of like he tapped into something. I mean, I also made a film about Johnny Cash. And there's a similar kind of just authenticity of like, he is who he is, and no matter what we may disagree about, like we trust this guy. People from very different backgrounds will trust him. It's
the even thing about him and John is like they were symbols of like idealism for generations, and then they die at a time where then cynicism is at a rise. Like if you look at like when John dies, it's like the 80s, and the 80s is famous as like one of the most cynical times in American. And then I talk about like when Bourdain died, it felt like the end of the Obama era, and so much as like after that, it's like we live in whatever this current time is. And I think people, because it's hard to process all of that, they put it on to like he was this guy, and then like he was holding it all together. And I do think he uniquely represented. He was trusted by what now thinks of disparate groups of people.
Yeah. I mean, these are like, so many of the films I've made are about where culture connects us. So many of my films, and it's something I've always been interested in. Part of it is, I started my career in left-wing journalism, and I felt like it was a place where people didn't just preach to the converted, they argued with the converted. And it just drove me a little insane. And so I've always wanted to make films for people I don't agree with, and tried to look at stories about how we see each other. I mean, to me, what culture is how we see ourselves and how we see other people. And even now I think about this a lot, especially in the moment we're in now, and some of these you could say are, a lot of these are stories of kind of what's left of the monoculture, what's left of or the last bits of, Bourdain is, again, one of these last threads of a monoculture, when people watched, cable TV a lot.
Exactly.
Even today, 10 years, 10 years later, it's changed so 100%. Much. So I think there's that aspect of it. I mean, of course, what people put on to people like Tony or John is unfair and not logical. It's emotional.
Yeah.
But I get what the emotional thing they're reacting to is, here's somebody who spoke to me, who in a way saw me, or I saw myself in them, and wasn't trying to sell me something, that they were authentically themselves.
Yeah, and I think they become like talismans of authenticity that people try to wear. And authentically.
Exactly, making the T-shirts. And
the other,
else.
I mean, especially John. I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of people who have conspiracies around Tony's death. Mm-hmm. Have you learned this? I don't know if it came up.
Only a tiny bit, but
it's much more recently because of the nature of. I bring it up because it connects to the Paul is dead phenomenon. Feels like an early version of a thing that now is everything.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and sort of how now everything is Paul is dead?
I mean, Paul's dead is one of the first kind of big conspiracy theories. And, part of it was, I mean, the Beatles were so scrutinized and people just, again, wanted to write and think about them. I mean, the whole Paul's dead thing started, I believe, as kind of almost a joke from a DJ at the University of Michigan radio station, I think. And it was kind of done tongue in cheek, and then it kind of grew. And then the thing I never realized until I really dug into the McCartney film was that the moment it exploded, it had been there for months or maybe longer, but it exploded at the moment Paul went away to Scotland, and right when John had said he wanted to break up the band, and when there was a vacuum.
Yeah.
And so people suddenly are saying, well, he must be dead because he wasn't to be found anywhere. And so, and again, I went back and read all those articles, and even the people that were writing those things, it was all pretty tongue in cheek. Like, I don't know how much anybody actually believed Paul was dead. It just felt like this is kind of a fun thing to
It's like an early meme thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But thankfully for that time, for the most part, it did not have the mechanisms we currently have for things to then take over.
Where suddenly, AI could create all kinds of evidence of these things.
100%.
Our brains are certainly wired to believe things and believe things we want to believe. I mean, it's part of what makes us human and part of what makes us fallible, is that. And conspiracy theory, I've always been really interested in the mechanisms of that. And I do feel like we live in an era where everything is so, we get to select so much of our own truth about things. And I even see myself being algorithmically pandered to, and just, I've deleted most social media from most devices. And I haven't been on Twitter or anything like that in a decade. So I try and, I come, again, I started as a journalist. I am an old school. I love stories about journalism, and I love that kind of deep work. I mean, what I've also seen, and part of what even a film like Best of Enemies is about, is the transition. We call it all journalism, but what we've seen is a transition from actual reportage to opinion.
Yeah.
And suddenly opinion's way cheaper and gets people way more riled up, and you can just have it everywhere.
Yeah.
And nobody does work. I mean, and even though I subscribe and read a lot of people on Substack, and I'm glad it's there, and I like giving money to writers I like, but so much of it is just opinion. And I like real reporting, so that's the thing that just has been getting smaller and smaller that I keep missing.
So I want to talk about Lorne.
Yeah.
Our friend Lorne. Well, let's start with this. Do you have an impression from spending so much time with him?
I can't do it. It's funny. Everybody does a Lorne imitation except for John Mulaney. And John, who's spent as much time with Lorne as anybody. I feel like I would just be doing a bad imitation.
Yeah, everyone does.
So.
Other than James Austin Johnson. I don't know if his Lorne is Lorne now.
Yes. Well, he's so good. Like his Dylan through the
Dylan
decades is genius. And Lorne now is different, and Lorne's voice, having tried to record Lorne has a strange voice that's hard to, it just becomes like it's guttural.
Yes.
And And as we were shooting the film, oftentimes he wouldn't wear a microphone, which at a place like SNL's crazy. So we would go in when we would shoot and we'd put a dozen microphones in his office and we'd hide microphone. I mean, it was a crazy sound job.
I've spoken to Lorne once.
Yeah.
And the thing that people will tell you if they're not on the record, but I can say it because I've spoken to him, he talks weird.
Yeah.
Now, in the past, he talked pretty straightforward, but now he talks, how I describe it, he's sort of, it's like you're in this sort of like loop, and out of nowhere, he'll just throw out things, but not give you context. So he'll say first names.
Yeah.
You'll be like, you're just talking, he goes, and we'll have Jim playing Biden. And you're like, oh, so now you're telling me how, what do you do in that situation?
Well, it's funny because my normal process.
Did you know that ahead of time?
Well,
and then what do you do?
I'd interviewed him once before.
Oh, for Steve?
For Steve. But so something I do at the beginning of every film, if it's with a living subject, is I sit down and just with a tape recorder and we just talk. So, with McCartney or Steve Martin or other people, and the McCartney ended up becoming all just those conversations, and so it kind of grew, but there's like an intimacy and a lack of, time doesn't matter. We could just talk, but I want to see how you see your own story and build a rapport and all that. So I went to Lorne's office with the tape recorder, and Lorne is a fascinating conversationalist. He tells you, he just an amazing jukebox of anecdotes.
Sure, yeah.
But what I realized is, Lorne can't tell his own story. Yeah. Like it's not that he's even an unreliable narrator. He's not a narrator. He is the Wizard of Oz who speaks in, rhymes and riddles. Yeah. And you're just trying to figure out what the hell that meant. So in the beginning I said, this isn't something where he and I talk for hours and hours and hours and hours, and he kind of lays it all out and walks me through his, emotional state at every time. So we had this good rapport going, and it's strange because this film, I never actually pitched him doing a film about him, and he never said, yes, I want you to make a film about me. But somehow this film got made.
Was it connected to the 4 SNL docs?
So this film was supposed to be 50 years SNL, 5 documentaries. This was supposed to be...
make more sense.
Makes more sense. That's what I pitched. And I mean, I'll tell you the story of how this came together. I mean, I got a call from Katie Hochmeyer at NBC late night saying, would you meet with Lorne to talk about, this is 3+ years ago, talk about SNL 50, doing something documentary about SNL 50. So I meet at the Polo Lounge in LA, classic. Lorne's only half an hour late.
Nice.
And we have a great lunch, but we're talking about Mike Nichols and we're talking about, all kinds of things,
sure. I already can imagine. He's like, and so you'll do the docs.
Yeah.
You're
well,
like,
no, he didn't. He didn't.
Okay,
so then he said, and I hadn't figured out, I more wanted to hear what he wanted. Then I said, well, I have some ideas. And he said, well, why don't you come next week's a show week, come and Friday night, meet me and tell me your ideas. So next week, Friday night, 9 p.m., meeting at Lorne's office. And I go in, I think I'm meeting with Lorne, but there are 16 people in his office and it's all the senior writers, producers, and Lorne. And he says, okay, tell us your ideas. So I pitch, and I had like a dozen different ideas, and it was like the cowbell sketch could be one. And at some point I said, there could be a documentary about you, Lorne. I think that would be really fascinating. And anyway, and so I go through all these ideas and I finish. I sit down on the couch next to Lorne, and he doesn't say anything. And I said, so what do you think? And he turns to his producer in the corner, Caroline, and says, Caroline, what do you think? And she's like the kid that doesn't want to get called out in class. And she, so I think there were some good ideas there. Yeah. And she like tosses the hot potato to Steve Higgins or whoever was in that room. And they were all kind of non-committally positive. And then the meeting breaks up and we all leave. And I'm standing there with Katie Hochmeyer. And I was like, what just happened? She said, oh, no, he likes you. We're doing it.
It's just like how people get cast on the show.
Exactly. It's like I had that experience. But we didn't know which ones we were making. I thought, oh, I'll direct one of these documentaries for SNL 50. But then word came back like Lorne would be interested in doing a documentary about himself. And then I said, well, if that's going to happen, it can't have anything to do with Lorne or Broadway Video, or it has to be totally separate. And so it kind of broke off at that point, and we ended up making it with Focus Features, and Lorne hasn't seen the film, so I don't know if he'll ever see the film. We have a premiere tonight. He may or may not sit through. I don't know.
Well, it's show week. It's a show week, right?
It is a show week.
What day is today?
Thursday. He said Thursday night was the best night of the week to do something.
Do you do an entire premiere around his schedule?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
He'll probably stop by the party if there's.
He's definitely coming to have his picture taken.
Yes.
I know that.
100%.
I know that. And I know, Keenan's doing an introduction with me tonight, and, it should be fun. Yeah, you should come. But I, so it just became this thing that, and then the idea was, well, all these things are hitting around SNL 50. Because this became a more elaborate, deeper dive, we're like, well, maybe it comes out at the back side, like at the end of the SNL 50 stuff. And then I quickly realized like that was a terrible idea because everybody would be so sick of SNL at that moment, and everybody would have written their articles about it. And then I thought, well, maybe it would come out on the actual 50th anniversary, which would have been October of last year of 2025. But then Focus just thought even more time would be good. So now we're coming out 15 months after the SNL 50. So who knows about timing, but it just grew into its own thing.
So you have a subject who cannot tell his own story, and it is a story that has been told in different forms a million times. Books. There's a Lorne book came out last year.
Yeah.
And how do you decide what story you're going to tell, how you're going to tell it, that it will be your take on this?
Well, again, in the beginning, it's like reporting.
Yeah.
It's like start talking to people, start shooting. The thing Lorne did is he said you can be in any meeting. Sometimes you can shoot in a meeting, but you can't shoot in every meeting. But you can shoot in some meetings. Meaning part of it had to do, I will say, a lot with the host. And, being a host on SNL is a very vulnerable position to be in. Not everybody wanted cameras in those rooms, but a lot of people did and agreed. I think we shot maybe over 11 different episodes. Wow. But I watched a lot of those meetings, and part of it was just actually seeing how the sausage is made and kind of seeing Lorne in those rooms, hearing Lorne be funny. I mean, stuff that people don't see or hear, and just kind of that. And then, the incredible world of people around Lorne who owe many of them their careers to Lorne, plus people at the show, so it's, on the one hand, it's weird to interview people about their boss.
Yeah.
Not, and certain people I think had a lot of a kind of like they'd never talked about Lorne before publicly. Is like, are we allowed to do this? Like they, it was like the things they tell their friends at dinner parties, but have never said publicly, so just trying to navigate that. And then, the people who've come through the SNL world, and there's, of course, like when it comes to Lorne, it's like a cottage industry of talk, in it's almost like a Kremlinology of, how people, what's happening in there and all of that kind of stuff. So, but I thought that also was interesting. So in a way, I think the film was also a portrait of how people talk about Lorne and their own kind of projections on Lorne. Certainly that's part of it. But then I think the film, in a way, is like my first nature documentary, because the beginning, what you see in the beginning of the film is my experience of literally day one of filming. So we had all these great, nice conversations. I pull out the camera and he hides. And it wasn't just that he was hard to find. Like, I think he was really being evasive, to the point where on the first day I thought it was a bit. I was like, really?
And you will never know if it was.
Yeah. But I felt like the whole process of making the film, it's another kind of thread of the film, is it's my journey as a filmmaker, going from just trying to like capture this rare creature on camera to like getting closer, and he's getting a little calmer and I can get closer and closer. And then, finally feeling like, okay, I can get a close up.
Yeah. And it's like at his house in the country, and it's like, it's quiet.
Yeah.
And it's nice. It comes at a nice time movie. You're like, you're in you feel like everything is being so busy. And then you're like, oh, it can be a person for, I feel like maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Where you're like,
and that was my breakthrough, being like, okay, we can go to his house in Maine.
Huge.
And that was huge for us. But it took 2 years to get there.
That's unbelievable. That was the part. It was like, okay, that shot is the movie. If you just had that, it's like worth it. The benefit is everyone's funny throughout the entire movie.
I wanted the film to be funny. I really, really wanted the film to be funny. And there's part of it, Lorne has this speech in the film about a big, dumb movie. I feel like part of this, I wanted to be a big, dumb movie.
Yeah.
Even though it might be smart too or whatever, but it's also, I just wanted it to be funny in that the people that love SNL want something to be funny. So I thought about it as like a SNL fan, which I've been my entire life. What would I want to see? I'd say, well, how do we tell stories of Lorne's life where there's no footage? And I thought, what if I call Robert Smigel and we get the TV Funhouse team together and like do new cartoons? I was like, I want to see that. So then start collaborating with Smigel and those guys on that was amazing. But just looking for the humor of it where we could. I mean, there are like little nods in there to like Tom Schiller films from the early SNL films in the 70s. But I felt like I came up with the whole theory, which if I'm ever going to talk about it, this would be the place to talk about it, of the laughs in a film like that, or maybe in documentary, which is the three types of laughs. One is the borrowed laugh, which is you're just showing a funny clip.
Yeah.
We know it's funny. We show it. It's funny. The found laugh, which is I interview somebody and they said something funny and we put it in. And then the created laugh, which is an edit is funny or ironic clip is something that makes it funny. And so I wanted all those funny gears working as much as I could.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the edit where it's like someone says something really big and then you like cut to like a face of a cow. I think you cut to the fish often, I feel like, are a relief valve. And I think that does work. I think the fish imagery, you're like, oh, in many ways, he's like a fish in a bowl. But also you're like, I think it's to do SNL, you have to be like both extremely irreverent to taking yourself seriously while also literally being so self-obsessed that all you do is take yourself and figuring out doing it in the way that SNL would stomach, right? It's like all Lorne's taste of like what is the right amount of nostalgia and what is too much of nostalgia. You've talked about you'll spend a lot of time thinking about a person and like obsessing over what they consume. You'll read the books they read. You watch, and you want to tell the story how they would tell it themselves in some way. Yeah, and it's something that I try to do as well with this. But I'm curious if you run a risk of being too credulous to a person. This thing I think about myself, like, do you then defer too much to a person's own narrative of a telling? And like, especially in the case with you say when you're doing a movie about someone who is a boss, did you consider having people that have like much more contrary takes on Lorne who worked there or had much harder times working there?
I mean, I think of myself a little bit like a method director, like to your point that kind of everything about their ethos is kind of what I'm trying to get in there. So a film like Mr. Rogers is like a very simple, deep, clean, emotional storytelling. My next film was about Orson Welles' last documentary, or a documentary about it called They'll Love Me When I'm Dead, which is like a chaotic, funny, crazy documentary, which reflected Orson, but I think Bourdain, I mean, all of my films, I want them to feel like the subject.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like for a job like this, I come into it and I have said this literally, that I'm not here to praise you. I'm not here to bury you. I'm just here to understand. And I feel like that's my job. I'm not, I've read every book and I've read people saying this and that. I feel like this is the one moment ever to have Lorne, to get a sense of who he is, and as much as you can kind of understand what makes him tick and see what he might be like in the room. And not without, I'm not doing it blindly. I'm not, it's the same with McCartney too. It's like, I want to understand the mistakes and understand, the complication of it. But this is the one chance to kind of channel him. And I feel like, and I asked him about a lot of other, whatever about whether Sinead O'Connor or having Trump on the show. And, I use some of that in there. But again, Lorne doesn't give clean answers to anything. No. He's not wrestling with it, and I think one of the things people don't appreciate about Lorne is that they think that he has a grand plan and he moves a finger and people disappear and appear and anybody does whatever he wants. And I think from Lorne's point of view, he's sweating getting next week's show on.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you talk to him, almost inevitably, the first thing we talk about is last week's show or this week's show and what's happening right now. And I think, if you talk to him about, why do you have Donald Trump host the show? He was saying, I thought it'd get good ratings. I thought it was interesting. He was on the cover of every magazine that week.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I was trying to put my hand on the scale of, politics in America. People ascribe these kind of grand designs. And I think he is way more in the trenches than people realize.
Yeah, I think he prefers, probably because he doesn't want to he doesn't want to be a person of grand, he doesn't want, to handle the pressure of now being a person who is essentially has power. Yeah. I did when I interviewed him, I asked him, was like, well, when you started, you guys were anti-establishment. In many ways, SNL is the establishment. And he could not process this information. He's like, we have young people and we're still, and I was like, and he's just doing the same job. Yeah. It's a one line. So I imagine it's quite hard. It was like, there are people, I imagine even during that time that you filmed, it's hard because they had frustrating experiences, but not because Lorne did something to them. Just Lorne's created the world of being an SNL.
Yeah.
A certain person hosts that they disagree with.
Yeah.
And it's Lorne passive. There's sort of this passiveness that makes it hard to. Even if there was a dramatic drama that he wanted to capture, it's hard to do because Lorne is not actively engaging it. He's sort of passively, these things just have to happen.
Touch, and then suddenly, I think Lorne's job is like 1,000 phone calls a week that are all just tiny little things, And as he says, if he does his job well, it's invisible.
Yeah.
And I do think Lorne we say it in the film too. It's like SNL is just a reflection of the whole culture this week, and that's what he's trying to do. And he's not trying to necessarily push it in one way or another. He's just trying to reflect it, and if you go back and look at SNL old episodes on Peacock or wherever, it's like, oh, that's kind of exactly what people were talking about at that moment. And I think that's part of why the show's lasted, is he's not trying to put his own point of view on things. His own point of view is kind of the last thing he wants to put on things.
Yeah, if anything, his point of view is not having a point of view.
Absolutely. And it's not Lorne Michaels Saturday Night Live. If it had been, the show wouldn't have lasted.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the tensions that have existed. And I think somewhere in the recent Lorne book, which is like people who want the show to have a point of view. And he's like, 100%. No, the show doesn't have a point of view.
No, and that's where people get angry at him. And, there are times it's frustrating for everybody, and I think his point of view is, when I'm taking criticism from everybody, then I'm probably doing the right thing. As he said, it is called broadcasting.
Yeah.
There's a broad audience. And And it's funny in terms of, him feeling like he's still in the trenches. I asked everybody when I interviewed them, when do you think SNL became perennial? Like, at what point do you think the show became a thing that was not going to go away?
Yeah.
And some people said, oh, it was after the 97 season, and they kind of rebirthed a new cast, and it was great and stronger than ever. Or it was in the 87 season, when Dana and Hartman and everybody came in, or 9/11, it became this thing that just was part of America. And I asked Lorne, and he said, maybe this year. This is the 50th anniversary. So just something, again, that he doesn't allow himself to rest in that way.
One thing, Shane Gillis is brought up a little bit, and I do, like, as a follower of SNL, it does seem like that situation really affected Lorne. Like, it felt like, I think it was like Lorne's last stand or whatever. Yeah. Can you talk about, as a person who sort of were there around one, I believe you were there one of the weeks Shane hosted, what did that situation mean to Lorne?
I think,
for those who don't know, Shane Gillis was cast, and then he was...
After a few days,
clips of him being racist and or ironically racist, depending on your opinion, on a podcast where it came out. And then NBC asked Lorne to fire him, and essentially he had to... Also, Shane at some points did not a good apology. Yeah. That Shane will admit, if he did a normal apology, everything would have been different. Anyway.
Yeah. So it was a complicated situation. I think, it was, and again, like the writing staff, the producing staff, and the cast now is like so diverse. But I think there was a moment, I think Lorne's just trying to pull in different flavors.
Yeah.
And Shane was somebody who was like more right-coded in a lot of ways. And so, and was talented, obviously, but I think it was at a moment, I mean, he says this, it was kind of the peak of a certain kind of, political correctness, I guess, or whatever you call it. And that I think the thing that hurt him the most is just having his hand slapped by the corporate bosses. I think that's really, it's even less about the people and the politics. It's not about the politics. It's just about, that, and it's in a time, getting to your point earlier, that where people, including people in the cast, want the show to have opinions about things. And it's incredibly difficult to not take sides, but again, there are people that say that SNL does take sides, I mean, I think, certainly a lot of people on the right criticize it too, and it does have a kind of a, center left maybe point of view on things. Certainly they make fun of Trump enough and enough of that, but with good reason. But as Lorne always keeps saying, it's like this show is shown in Oklahoma and Kansas too. And in a way, where else do we all even watch the same thing to disagree about it?
Yeah, and it does, at least in the movie, it's like, it seems like he's like still people, like I think probably at that point, he's like, at this point I can do he's not doing anything radical. So he's like, the show is the only thing that succeeds anymore in television. And I imagine it's like, once a decade or so, for a while, a thing like this would happen, and he would get in trouble, and he would be overruled. The Norm Macdonald's probably the most famous recent example. And it did feel like he has a chip on his shoulder around the Shane thing, because he was like, at this point, I'm still having to deal with it. Yeah. Is that your...
Well, and then, Shane became incredibly successful. Yeah. So I think part of it was like, you guys, we could have weathered this, and in the end, it actually would have been great for the show. I think that is really...
You probably... it's hard because it's not a thing Lorne would do, but Lorne probably should have been like, please run your apology by me first.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Did you at any point consider playing the clip of what Shane said?
I didn't, just because just because whenever I got too specific into things like that, it just, the film covers so much in 93 minutes or whatever, that when I started to get deeper into stories like that, it just started to become a different film, and again, it's like, I've read all those articles. The people write more articles, and they can write articles about this film that way. But this is like a chance to get a glimpse of kind of Lorne's thinking and kind of understand that. But to run that and then put him on the spot about it, I wouldn't. When I did put him on the spot about things,
that's the problem. Yeah,
there's no there to get.
Yeah, it's impossible. It would be impossible, and then it's a rabbit hole that would be extremely unsatisfying to watch because you'd show it, and then you'd have no relief of that tension of it because Lorne will not be able to. He talks too weird. It's people don't do impressions of him enough. It's probably the real take. So in the doc, you have Steve Martin and Lorne at dinner, and they bring up the idea of leaving, and Lorne's like, "I'm not leaving," right? But you spent a lot of time with a lot of people that work there. Mm-hmm. What are they saying? Who do they think?
I mean, this is like a parlor game, but probably more for people outside of SNL than inside. I mean, he obviously has a few lieutenants that have been there for a long time. Yeah. Steve Higgins, Eric Kenward, people that have been there for decades, who are doing a lot of heavy lifting on the show, it will be said. The thing is, I don't think there's a person to replace Lorne. I think there might be a couple of people to replace Lorne. Because the thing is, Lorne has two jobs. He has managing down, which is most of what we hear about. Yeah. It's cast and writers and people that have had those experiences coming up, and they all go on podcasts and talk about those things. The other part of the job is managing up, and Lorne is a genius at managing up. There have been a dozen heads of NBC in the time he's been at SNL, and he's outlasted all of them. The way you deal with sponsors. I mean, after a show one night when we were filming, and this is gearing up for SNL 50, and they're trying to get people to underwrite all these things. And I go into his office 1:15 in the morning, and he just starts telling me stories and talking. And I'm just thinking, surely we could talk about this another time. Yeah. Finally, I interrupt him and I say, "I'm sorry, Lorne. The CEO of Pepsi is outside the door waiting. Maybe you should talk to him." He's like, "Oh, okay." But the amount of time he takes care of that stuff. I mean, he just launched this SNL UK 3 weeks ago, who's launching new TV shows and broadcast these days. So there is a part of the job that we don't see. And I think you need somebody with real gravitas, like cultural gravitas, to do that. And obviously there are people, that's where like a Tina or maybe a Seth or, people who can get people on the phone.
It's just so funny because everyone ultimately goes like, it's either like those are the names. Yeah. Those and Tina, I'd never see talk about it. Seth is like, it's just gonna be some person. SNL UK just has some person. Yeah. But that's what Seth would have to say. It just seems like,
but I think they need the person who has the weight to both call politicians or call whomever
and call Ariana Grande or whatever.
Yeah, but also to call the CEO of whatever company and say, we need this from you, or will you do this? Because that ultimately is what protects the show. I mean, the show is incredibly wasteful. It is. I mean, but that's part of what Lorne believes makes it what it is. I mean, for instance, the film units, they have 3 dedicated film units every week, meaning they know they're going to make 3 films a week. They know at best they're going to only air 2. So they know they're going to throw away 1 film a week.
And most put on YouTube. At most.
At most go on YouTube, so that's kind of crazy. Just knowing that you're doing all this work that is not going to make air.
The amount of work that does not get made is no one would be like, we're agreeing to do a show that, I don't know, 80% of the work does not get, right? Because you're having you have a huge writing staff. Mm-hmm. That sets is crazy. That they have multiple sets being built every week that are thrown into, that are just like.
Yep. No, and And so it's a huge cast now, huge writing staff, huge film units. It's just ballooned, and it's still working, but it's the kind of thing that if you're a network exec and you don't have Lorne there, the first thing you're going to say is maybe it's not 400 million an episode, or 4 million an episode. What is it now? Not 400, but
that would be it.
But it's something, I know.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it, but I think it is something, in that range. And they're like, surely we could do this for a third less.
Yeah. And you could. But what is the show?
Yeah.
There's currently, as I'm sure will be the case every single year until Lorne's dead, rumors that this coming finale is his last episode because Paul McCartney's musical guest and Will Ferrell is the host.
Yeah.
So that is the type of, and if you look at every season finale, that's what it is like. Having more experience than almost everyone in that world, when you see that, does any part of you go like, well, maybe that could be his last episode, or you think he's doing it until he dies? Oh,
he's inseparable from the show. The show is Lorne. Lorne is the show. It's his life's work. I think Lorne is at the least going to be always a kind of a emeritus figure in some ways, or even more. I mean, he may see more and more bits at the kind of day-to-day, but still on show weeks, Lorne is there every single day. He's maybe not there as late as he used to be, but he's still there every day. He doesn't want to give it up. And also, I think if I were him, understanding, like, it's part of what keeps him going too. It's like, why give up this thing that you created, that you love, and you get to be Lorne Michaels and all of that. And I mean, one of his friends said to me, Lorne really loves his family, but if you asked him to pick between SNL and his family, he would think about it, and he'd pick his family. Nice. But the fact he would have to think about it.
SNL is not his job. It is Lorne Michaels, right? Yes. So you're essentially like choosing between your family and existing, like your individual life.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what is his life without it? Like, literally, he would have to invent. I mean, obviously, lots of people do that while retiring, but like every minute of his life is built around, including his vacations are built around like when the SNL vacation.
Well, other way around.
Yeah.
SNL's built around Lorne's vacation schedule.
SNL's built around Lorne is the fact.
No, everything about it. It's about when he goes to sleep. It's about when his kids have, spring break, or whatever. The show was built exactly around Lorne.
So weird.
Yeah.
It's such a weird guy. Do you ever tell him he's weird?
In a strange way, I think Lorne's not actually that weird. That the thing I think that doesn't get enough attention is that Lorne's Canadian. So there's part of him that is like so wholesome, loves his family, loves baseball, loves America, loves history. Just is very just down the middle in a way even that most Americans wouldn't be, like, so embracing of the Americanness. But also I think there's like a code of morality that Canadians have that a lot of Americans somehow don't have, of just loyalty, showing up. I mean, stuff that Lorne is very important to Lorne. People said this again and again. It's like when they have their own children, or if they have a parent who dies, Lorne is always the first person to show up or say something. Like this is when Lorne really shows up. And I think that's, again, just part of what makes him like not just a strange Wizard of Oz, but actually like a person who a lot of these people deeply love and invest all this, emotion in.
You spent all these times with like the great cultural figures of the 20th and 21st century. What century are these? And so I want to ask you sort of general questions of what you have learned. What have you learned about fame?
Fame is the same. Fame's boring. Fame is the least interesting thing about these people. Because, it's the same story. So I often think when I'm looking at telling these stories, like, fame is generic. So take that out of it. Yeah. It's not, in certain ways, genius is even generic.
That was going to be my next question about what did you learn about genius?
you know, genius is singular, and they're a genius, you know, but like with the McCartney film, it was almost like, forget that Paul's a genius.
Yeah.
He's just a guy going through a divorce, essentially, with his band, and he's 27, and he's never had a chance to grow up and tell that story as like a person. Like, he's actually relatable. And like, it's Paul McCartney, and most people think, what do I have to learn from Paul McCartney? So, you know, I'm more trying to think about the human part of it. And I remember, you know, one of my mentors was Peter Guralnick, the great music writer. And we did a film together about Sam Phillips, who started Sun Records. This is more than 25 years ago. And Peter gave me advice in the beginning. He said that the three least interesting things in writing about musicians are sex, drugs, and getting ripped off by your record label. Because everybody tells the same stories.
Yeah.
So it's like, put those aside. What makes this person unique, or what makes them universal, or what makes them, you know, and so I think about it that way. I'm not that interested in fame.
In terms of genius, is the difference between the person who writes Paul McCartney songs and a person who's even successful but not is there really no, to Paul, is there no difference to being a genius? Like, do you having interviewed geniuses, are they ultimately just artists and coincidentally what they do is genius?
I mean, there are people that are touched in different ways. You know, and some of them in an almost autistic way.
Sure.
That, I mean, I did a whole project with Brian Wilson years ago, and like, he's somebody who was just, you know, he was Mozart.
Yeah.
You know, but he was making surf music and, you know, torrents. So there are people like that. What's unique about somebody like Paul is how normal he is for somebody that is touched with a kind of a musical genius. But I've met a lot of people who are kind of musical geniuses in a way, and it's, you know, and there are actually a lot of people who you see them in music schools who are just like, oh, they can pick up any instrument and they can play anything. And what's interesting is that Paul had that talent, but he also had the collaborators, he had the cultural timing, he had the ability to kind of bring other culture into it, you know. So that's what's interesting about it, is that his antenna was also tuned out to what else was happening at the time.
What have you learned about masculinity? You do a lot of these have been about, a lot of your documentaries have been about men.
Yes.
What have you learned about us?
White men.
Yeah. What have you learned about us white men?
More about white men. You know, it took me forever to realize that I made films about culture. Like, that wasn't a thing I realized going in, but it's what I've always loved my whole life. You know, I've always loved books and movies and art and music, of course, and of all sorts. Like, I started when I was starting. I made films about Muddy Waters and Stax Records and all those things, and I love all of that. But the men, that's a good question. You know, I mean, I think it's funny because I feel like even though I have made a lot of biographical films, I feel like they're also films about myself because they're the questions I'm asking.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, even the McCartney film, it's a question about how do you deal with your own legacy? How do you not do what people expect you to do? How do you balance your family with your work? I mean, these are things that I ask myself. And so these are things I'm asking in the film. Steve Martin, same thing. You know, like I'm asking questions of myself. And in a way, I think a lot of what I gravitate towards in these people is less about them as men, just them as people often living creative lives of kind of, what can I learn from this person, or where do I see my own experience in that experience? You know, and I think a major part of my storytelling is about questions, not answers. You know, a film like Won't You Be My Neighbor, you know, 6 scenes in that film end on questions. The movie ends on a question. The title of that movie is a question.
Yeah.
That whole movie is about making you sitting there in that theater, ideally, ask yourself questions, you know. So I really like asking questions and making you as an audience have to come up with your own answer.
Do you have a sense of why it's been largely men that you reflect yourself via?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, part of it is opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, and part of it is, I mean, we're in this moment where like I'm not allowed to make films about women. You know, I have to stay in my lane. So there's that.
And there's only so many cultural figures that were women. I mean, like partly like you're telling historical stories.
Yeah.
And because of history being what it is, there's only so many women that rose to that level in history anyway.
No, and I would love to make a great film about a woman.
Really, when working on this, I was like, well, like there's like, it's like, I wonder if anyone will do a Whoopi doc, and like it was just announced.
Yeah. Oh, was it just announced?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of in that stage now where it's like, I mean, I think it's one of the things from this boom in documentary is kind of anybody who could have a documentary made, who's willing, has had one or is having one made.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm actually trying to not do a biographical documentary. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of done it, and you know, I've made some of the films you've listed.
Yeah.
Some of those are not biographical documentaries. People tend to always focus on the biographical documentaries, you know, and say, well, that's what you do. And I say, well, no, those tend to be bigger.
Yeah.
Just because the subjects might be bigger.
Yeah. It's easy to remember that. It's easy to, if you haven't seen it, know you did it because it's just like, oh, you did the Steve Martin documentary where it's like the ones that are about an idea, it's harder to like know from the title. The last of these questions, what have you learned about the creative process? Because you focus on the creative process.
No,
I focus on the
creative process is one of my all-time favorite things.
Yeah.
You know, I did a series called Abstract for Netflix about design. And it's funny. I mean, it's one of my favorite things I've ever worked on. And the first episode I directed, it was about Christoph Niemann, this amazing German illustrator, who's a good friend of mine to this day. And I felt like, I remember when I was working on that, my editor came, I went into the edit bay and he said, you know, he's talking about editing when he's talking about design.
Yeah.
And I said, no, he's talking about directing, you know, and to him, he's talking about illustrating.
Yeah.
And it's like the rules of how you be a creative person and how you stay creative and stay challenged, you know, are just things that are always fascinating to me, you know. So it's both the process of creativity and part of what I think of design as like art with clients. That's kind of what documentary is too, you know. So I feel a lot of sympathy with, you know, oddly, I feel like designers and architects are very close to documentary filmmakers in that way. And a lot of my friends are designers and architects. Yeah, Christoph says he has a decision tree for work, which I love. He said, I think of three things when I think about work. I think, is this job going to make my money? Is this job going to be fun? Is this job going to advance my art? And every job has to be at least 2 out of 3. And so I think about that all the time.
Yeah, especially now as you don't have a project, I imagine.
And I'm aiming for 3 out of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at this point you can get a 3 out of 3. So now it's time for a final segment. It's like a lightning round, but you don't have to answer it quickly. Okay. These are just questions we ask every time, so they're sectioned off. You can also pass on these if you don't have one. Do you have a short story of an interaction with a legendary celebrity, actor, writer, director you're willing to share?
I thought about that Gore Vidal story earlier. I was like, oh, I should tell that. But then I got it out of the way earlier. I've had so many interesting. I mean, here's one example that pops into my head. That years ago, when I was doing the Sam Phillips documentary, I was interviewing Scotty Moore, who was Elvis's guitarist. You know, the original guitar player for Elvis, played legendary guitar player. And he was coming into Memphis for us to shoot. And I made a reservation at the nicest steakhouse in Memphis. I thought, this is going to be amazing. And so Scotty comes, he's totally sweet. And I said, I made a reservation at this really nice steakhouse tonight. And he said, well, I noticed there was a TGI Fridays on the corner. I really like their, you know, Jack Daniels braised
Yeah.
beef, whatever thing.
Yeah.
Can we go there? And I was like, sure. And so we went and ate at TGI Fridays and had a great dinner. And, that was, he just was a guy that wanted to eat at TGI Fridays.
Who is the best living documentary filmmaker?
Oh, that's such an unfair question. Because documentary is not one thing. Documentary is like 50 types of film all rolled into one. I mean, there are people who changed the form, who, people like Errol Morris, of course, people who I watched their films before I knew I was going to be a documentary filmmaker and realized, oh, there's a different type of film you could make here. And even Michael Moore, I will say, I don't make his kind of films. I wouldn't say they're the best films, but just people who change the form, I always think that's really interesting. And so, there was such a kind of an orthodoxy to documentary for so long. So people that kind of blew that up. I mean, Ross McGilwee is another one. Sherman's March is one of my all-time favorite films. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Funny, but heartbreaking too, in many ways. So anyway,
that works.
Maybe that works.
Do you have a time you bombed? Whatever that means, you were working in some capacity in your job, and it is akin to bombing or failing.
Oh, I mean, when you make stuff, people criticize you a lot, and there's that kind of bombing. And it's funny. It's like I've had my own like RAM experiences that McCartney had.
What is your RAM?
Well, I mean, my first documentary, it's funny because a lot of people, when it came out, like we made it for no money. My first documentary was called Shotgun Freeway Drives Through Lost L.A. And it was this crazy Mondo film, but like Joan Didion was in it and James Ellroy and different people talking about the meaning of history in L.A. And the L.A. Weekly wrote a review. It was Manola Dargis, and she just trashed it. Again, I remember the name and everything exactly, of course. And then she went on. It helps that she went on to do all that, or not. But I will remember that forever. But it's a film again that, like, over time, then so many people have said, like, discovered that film or loved it. But yeah, the wounds are deep. I try to not read anything anymore.
I think it's probably for the best.
Yeah.
What's the last movie, TV show, or play or book that made you cry, not necessarily because it was sad, but because it was good?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, maybe Train Dreams. I really found that touching. I don't know if you saw that movie.
I have not yet.
Don't watch it on an iPad. Watch it on the biggest screen you have. I mean, it's an immersive film. I just thought it was so beautiful. But the way you asked that question, there is sadness, but it's one of the things about Won't You Be My Neighbor was a film that I guess famously made people cry. And I thought a lot about that. And there was a thing Roger Ebert had said, not about the film, but before that, that, it's not sadness that touches him, it's goodness. And I think that was what made that film made people cry.
What is the best advice you took or the worst advice you didn't?
I mean, there's a quote that I've thought about a lot as a documentary filmmaker from Al Maisels, part of the Maisels brothers who did Grey Gardens and many, many other great documentaries. He said, if you end up making the film you set out to make, then you weren't listening along the way. And I think that's such an important part of the job.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people, it's part of my problem with film school, that, I come from journalism. Film school is all about your voice. What do you have to say? Journalism is all about your ear. What do you hear? And it's two very different things. So I see a lot of people kind of having decided what their documentary is completely before they make it, and missing so much along the way. And I love it when I start in one direction and then
Can you think of a documentary that changed radically from what you thought it was going to be?
I mean, even the Steve Martin documentary was something that I was shooting it for months, and I just kept thinking that everything was going in two different directions. Like there was this Steve who was the Steve in the archive, and he was this solitary figure intellectually trying to solve the problem of humor in the 70s. And then there was the guy I was hanging out with who had friends and a wife and a kid and a band and Marty Short and everybody, and was surrounded by people. And I couldn't reconcile them. And I just said, well, I think I'm going to make two different films. And so I literally split it. I had two different editors, composers, graphics people. They weren't allowed to watch the other film, so I really put a wall between the two and made them that way. And then took down the wall at the end and kind of put them together. And it's the contrast between the two films that I was interested in. But that was just me reacting to what I was getting.
Do you have an opinion or a creative idea that you thought was great, but everyone was telling you it was wrong, that maybe you listened to them, but you'll go to your grave and you're like, I was right, they were wrong. This shot need to be in it, whatever it is. Or an opinion that about documentaries, all options are good.
There's this thing that I hear a lot of comedians talk about, that they kind of enjoy failing at times. Like if they're doing improv and it goes off the rails, you kind of lean into it. And I think the older I get, the more I kind of like failure in a way, just feeling it and understanding it. Because it means you're trying something, and so, I feel, I don't know if it's good advice or not, but, try to fail.
Can you think of something that you failed at, but you're like, this is better because of it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because everything is just, I like making stuff, and what I learn on one film changes the next film. I remember when I did my Orson Welles documentary, They'll Love Me When I'm Dead, that I finished the first cut and I felt great about it. And I sent it to two friends. One was Jim Burke, an Oscar-winning producer, and one was Rick Rubin. And they both got back to me essentially saying, what the fuck is this? Just weren't buying it at all. And that actually was kind of great. And again, I just made the Mr. Rogers film. So I wanted to do something.
You wanted that reaction.
I wanted to just be punk rock about it and like just swing huge. And but that it needed to be what it was.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.